The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest in the world, and we just happen to live in them. One thing we can tell you, there are ghosts in the mountains.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am your host, Caleb Hanks, and I am but a shell of a man without my good friend and wonderful co-host, Mr. Dr. Captain Austin Burgess. Brother, how are you on this frigid Western North Carolina evening?
I am doing pretty good. You know, it's funny, last week we talked about preparing for the impending ice storm, and here we are a week later preparing for an impending snowstorm. But I'm actually excited about this one because I like snow.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks again for joining us on another episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. I am always very excited to do this show. Real quick, before we get into tonight's episode, I wanted to shout out to a fellow colleague of mine. We got a YouTube comment, one of the rare occasions where I was cruising the other day. And I was like, man, this is sounding very specific and very familiar because he was talking about being on an investigation with Joshua P. Warren back in the day. I click on their YouTube handle and I saw that it's this paranormal YouTube channel called Haunt Hops. And I get into this channel and I'm like, man, this dude is looking familiar. And then it hit me that this was a colleague of mine by the name of Brett Clark, and he actually joined the Lemur team when we did our weekend camp and investigation of the Brown Mountain Lights. And I was so thrilled to see that, number one, he's doing a paranormal channel, and the whole theme of his thing is he'll just go get a beer with these people that own these haunted establishments, pubs all over the place. In the last couple of years, he relocated back to Western North Carolina and started this channel. And dude, it's fantastic. I am enjoying his channel so much. And I was laughing so hard because he was at the Lake Lure Inn interviewing the staff there probably like a month before we did our investigation.
That is so funny.
And God, I just wish that we had somehow like booked the same time and run into each other because like, dude, even back in the day, I remember him just being like such a funny, personable dude. He has continued working on the paranormal stuff. His channel is absolutely wonderful. Just go to YouTube and search Haunt Hops and you'll see Brett Clark's channel. And dude, he's doing such good work. I emailed him immediately. He's got back in touch, and I think we're going to try to get him on the podcast and do some stuff in the future together.
Can't wait to talk to him. That sounds awesome. Maybe share a handful of some of the best stories he's gathered over the years.
Oh yeah, I was watching one of his interviews with one of the ladies that is one of the managers down there at the Lake Lure Inn. Was one of the people that we didn't get a chance to talk to, and I'm telling you, she's got some stories. She used to work the night shift from 11 to 8. Fantastic. Now, without just rambling on and on and on, please go check out Haunt Hops on YouTube. I think you'll really enjoy Brett's channel. But now it's time to get down to the spookily and the dookily. And tonight we're getting into something that I really have never heard of until you brought it up. And this thing called the Roan Mountain Ghost Choir. Now, we have talked about ghost choirs before, sort of. Apparitions kind of floating in the sky down near Chimney Rock.
Yeah, sort of adjacent, I guess.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of in the same vein, but
similar. I think this is more of a audible phenomenon.
Right, okay.
So yeah, it's kind of funny how this one fell onto my lap because like my grandma and family actually lived in the Tri-Cities area of Tennessee. So like Roan Mountain was an area that I've been familiar with, at least with the name, for years. But I do want to give a shout out to your dad, Mr. Bucky Hanks, for bringing this exact story to my attention. Because if you remember when we were preparing to do the Reynolds Mansion episode, he loaned me a copy of Micah's book and then a handful of other books with kind of folklore and ghostly tales from the area.
Yeah.
A few of those books were by the infamous John Paris, who's like a local folklorist for Western North Carolina. He helped document the Boojum story and a ton of other strange Appalachian folklore stuff, mostly centered in Western North Carolina, though. And one of his books titled My Mountains, My People was published in 1957. so definitely a classic. It features about 100 different Appalachian folklore stories that pairs collected over the years. But Mr. Hanks had one in particular bookmarked for me, and that was the ghostly choir of Roan Mountain.
There you go. Well, this means a lot when I say this, but thanks for always looking out for us, Pops.
Right? Yeah.
That man's been saving my ass since I was just a little idiot. But
see, it's kind of been on a short list of mine since we really were in the beginnings of this show. But, topics pile up and we kind of, get backlogged on some of those. But I'm really excited to dive into this because, the more I research this, really found that this one kind of has everything.
Yeah, man. Well, let's not piss off the YouTube commenters any further and let's dive into this, dude.
Let's do it.
When does this begin?
So to kind of set the stage for this one, Roan Mountain is located on the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. It's like kind of between Asheville and Johnson City. It's like the most adjacent way I could kind of think to describe it. But this mountain actually stands at 6,285 feet, which is, pretty impressive as far as mountains in the east go.
Yeah, because I think that like one of the highest peaks on the parkway heading past Mount Pisgah, isn't it like 6,400 or 60?
I believe Mount Mitchell is probably the one. I think it's like 66, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But still, no, for 62, anything over, 6,000 is pretty good for the east. So
yeah, that's on up there.
Yeah. So there's actually a legend that's attributed to the Catawba tribe that describes a battle there back in the day that they had with the Cherokee atop the mountain. And according to the legend, so much blood was spilled that the rhododendron turned from white to red. Now, there's no documented evidence that this battle ever occurred, but numerous Native American settlements have been found around the base of the mountain, and the Cherokee settlement that's named Oldfields was actually located near modern-day Elizabethton, Tennessee, so not too far off from that area. So really, who knows if there's any truth to this legend, but it can at least be assumed that Native tribes were some of the first to occupy this region. To me, the legend kind of sounds pretty damn similar to the ones that we heard about the Brown Mountain, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, sure.
The same Cherokee, Catawba battles and the same kind of, ghostly spirits that were left in that area. So who knows if that's just a version of, the white man kind of using their whatever artistic liberty to add something to Cherokee lore. Anyways, eventually the Spanish explorers did come into the Roan Mountain area in search of gold. And we had some world-renowned botanists that were coming up to Roan Mountain specifically looking for new exotic plant species. Because, when you get to higher elevations, anything over, 6,000 feet, you do get a lot of diverse plant activity out there that you don't really see growing below those elevations, which is rare for especially the eastern part of the United States because you get a lot of stuff at that elevation that there's not a lot of areas that it can reach that elevation necessary that some of these plants need to survive.
There was something similar like that going on at Grandfather Mountain, was there not?
Correct. Yeah. And I want to say, even speaking of Mount Mitchell again, I want to say there's some unique species of, biodiversity and plants that have specific roots in the, at least Mount Mitchell area for this part of the state.
Because wasn't one of the things at Grandfather Mountain that there was literally plants that only grow there or something like that?
Yeah, apparently.
That's crazy as shit.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool because, you're having what's kind of this revival of people coming in to visit this area just for new scientific discovery, which is pretty cool. But I was looking it up. The origin of the name Roan isn't really certain, so it's kind of interesting where it's kind of unknown where a name of something comes from. It's not attributed to any one person. Some people tell theories that Roan refers to the reddish splotches of the rhododendron blossom, and in the spring, I guess the mountain ash berries are turned that kind of similar color. And some people say it refers to Daniel Boone's roan horse. But again, there's no exact attribution for like where that kind of came from, which is interesting because most places are named after someone's last name or something like that.
Well, I've heard through the grapevine that these guys called the Wafer Brothers are gonna cover that song. Daniel Boone was a man. He was a big man.
I'll be excited to hear that one when it hits Spotify.
Yo, dude, you just wait.
Oh,
it's going to be a chart topper.
Go ahead and save the Wafer Brothers if you're listening.
Pre-save the Wafer Brothers. But it's actually just like save them because they're going to inevitably kill themselves accidentally.
Well, anyways, later in 1885, so moving along in the timeline for a pretty significant chunk here, former Civil War general and mining tycoon John T. Wilder, he constructed this huge hotel. It was kind of a lodge resort on top of Roan Mountain, and it was called the Cloudland Hotel. And again, like always seems to come back to some weird resort hotel, doesn't it?
That's some boojum shit right there,
I
bro.
mean, yeah. It's very much along that same plot line. But even thinking of like the Andrews Geyser Hotel and like some of the hotels that are, defunct and not there today, but were responsible for some of the first Brown Mountain Light sightings.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
You always come back to these sort of resort destinations that have some weird stuff going on.
Kind of makes sense, though, because they're like a little out there, I guess. They're in places where not a lot of people probably are, and so they're like good observatories.
I guess that makes sense.
I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here.
No, I follow. So this hotel, it was on top of a mountain, so as you could expect, offered beautiful views, and the rates, keep in mind, 1885, but $2 a day, $10 a week, and $39 a month. So, I didn't calculate the inflation on that, but that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel better about my income.
So the interesting thing about this hotel is it also set directly on top of the border between Tennessee and North Carolina. So part of the hotel was in one state, part of the hotel was in another.
That's actually really fun.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Dude, it'd be so sick, though, if they had a room where, like, your head was in North Carolina and your feet are in Tennessee. Oh, that's some tourist shit I would 100%
That's kind of like Four Corners.
Yeah, dude.
Out west, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So over the years, the guest list was pretty popular, especially with American politicians. You had some European royalty and other important cultural figures, such as Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Harvey Firestone, which were the same exact posse that was kind of palling around with E.W. Grove and Fred Seeley at the Grove Park Inn when they were in Asheville. So kind of cool that we found another stop on their list of getaways.
The WNC Rat Pack.
Yeah, right. The paranormal just follows these guys around.
Apparently.
But interestingly enough, going back to the hotel being located in two states, during the time that the hotel was open, during some of the prohibition, so alcohol consumption was legal in Tennessee, but illegal in North Carolina. So allegedly, they literally had a line drawn down the middle of the hotel to divide the state line, and alcoholic drinks could only be served on the Tennessee side. And one story actually tells that there was some local North Carolina sheriff, I think he was from Avery County, who would go sit up at the hotel bar in the dining room area and make sure, and he would just catch people that would venture into the North Carolina side with the drink in hand and write him a ticket.
What a dick. But yeah, it's really interesting because it's a super good shtick, like, just for people that wanted to go check that out.
Yeah.
But it's also, as a business owner, what a liability, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
well, I don't think they had the ALE back then to enforce that, but
yeah, but you still have somebody poking around, messing with people for it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the pre-equivalent to the ALE, alcohol law enforcement.
Man.
Yeah.
The man.
So, unfortunately, the high operating cost of maintaining this, like, mountaintop resort eventually kind of doomed the Cloudland Hotel, and it was abandoned by 1910 and quickly fell into a state of disrepair. By 1927, a pile of rubble was all that remained.
That's such a bummer. What a cool ass name for a hotel. The Cloudland Hotel.
Yeah.
That is so magical.
Yeah, it really is. Reminds me of like a Mario level or something.
Oh, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The ones where it's like the camera won't stop moving and you're being pushed
Right.
off the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
God, those things. That's probably where our anxiety comes from.
Right, the timer, the internal timer. So for centuries, there have been strange tales or tales of strange noises heard on top of Roan Mountain. Some reported hearing a choir of fairies, angels, or ghosts singing. Some thought the mountain music came from the spirits of the Cherokee and Catawba Indians. Some people felt that what they were hearing was the mountain actually talking to them, and some thought it was the devil himself. So quite a few different interpretations on this one.
I get that. If I had a quarter for every time of the day that I thought the devil was speaking to me, I could retire.
Just from on top of a mountain, the most logical place.
That's where it always happens. I am on top of a mountain every day of my life.
There you go. So these sounds were most often heard after one of the violent thunderstorms this area was known for. Some say it was a beautiful song, but others would describe it as 1,000 tormented screams. Pretty broad range of interpretations on that. Some believe that it to be the voices of the Catawba and Cherokee warriors that fought in that alleged bloody battle, and died on the mountain, while others believe that the voices belonged to an angelic choir that were practicing their song for the Judgment Day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think what I take away from that is people attributed that to whatever they kind of wanted to believe in and used that as a reinforcement for their own beliefs already, or pre-existing beliefs, if you will.
We can talk more about this later on because I'm assuming it will come up, but like the rare earth noise kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Something like the Taos hum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 100% where my brain is going with this thing.
Yeah. Totally understand. And I think that there are a lot of people that have kind of previously thought the same wavelength as that.
Yeah. Again, they are called rare earth noises because they're freaking rare.
Yeah.
But they do happen.
Yeah. The Taos hum is the one that keeps coming to mind for me just because that's right there with the San Luis Valley. But
right.
Yeah. But yeah, going back to the kind of choir sounds that people were hearing, there were a lot of people that kind of did try to come up and legitimately find a reasonable, maybe, scientific explanation for the time being on what this could have been. And there was a person named John Stroop. He was a member of the surveying team that was commissioned to establish the precise boundary from where North Carolina and Tennessee divided up on top of this mountain. Because I guess, they could be kind of general with it for the most sense until a hotel comes in that's serving alcohol where they have to determine exactly where the split is. So they really put in the work for this to happen. But he actually wrote in his diary, and he said that the wind was so powerful that it blew deep holes all over the northwest side of Roan Mountain. Farmers and area cattlemen then started to spread this legend that it was the devil's wind that spun the clouds of the mountain into a complete circular shape. So I don't know if that's the most scientific description of blue deep holes all over the northwest side of the mountain, but he's just basically insinuating that the wind up here was intense.
But is he talking about like holes that are being blown into the dirt, or is he talking about like when you go up to Black Balsam on the Parkway and you've got those like rocks where there's like erosion that's happened over the years?
I think that's what he's kind of alluding to. And if that's truly the case, that does kind of make sense because it's almost like a natural whistle type formation when you have wind push through that. But I really don't know if he found evidence to attribute to this, because if there was, I think there'd be some documentation other than his theorized words on this.
Kind of makes sense depending on how deep the holes were if they were in rock, because it's kind of like blowing on a bottle top.
Yeah, exactly. Bottle top and forcing wind through a certain chamber to make an audible sound.
I'm an expert at that.
So, as you can imagine, guests at the Cloudland Hotel occasionally reported hearing the haunting music that was described on the evil wind, as they called it. And John Parrish reported that guests would complain of the savage wind that blew across the Roan Mountain. And one said, the wind song was said to be louder than 1,000 humming bees encircling your head. It would even blow so strong, it would rock and sway the hotel. Which might be part of the reason they couldn't keep up with the upkeep of that place. If you've got what I would imagine is a fairly large hotel structure built on top of a mountain that's experiencing some intense winds, and it's swaying to and from, that's got to mess with some of your structure there.
I mean, my thought too is like how tough is it to get up to this place for patrons?
I'd imagine it had to be a pain in the ass back in the day.
Because it's like we've got seasonal restaurants. Those are easy to get to because the parkway is paved. But I mean, like, what year are they trying to get up this freaking mountain?
Right, yeah. I mean, I'd imagine they had to have some sort of trail to get them up in some sense. I wouldn't imagine hotel patrons just going and hiking for miles and miles to get to this resort.
I'm going to drink in town.
Yeah, right. So, and on top of that, you're hiking all the way up here and you're trying to get a good night's sleep, and all you could hear is this wind that's described as 1,000 humming bees encircling your head. So,
what was the draw to open this place?
I would imagine the views. That's got to be the selling point.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the views are great, but Satan has a constant stream of fart that's blasting the siding off the place.
Yeah, one guest described it like an incessant, continuous, and combined snap of two glass jars being tapped together.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
Yeah. I don't think of, you think of a resort being relaxing. That kind of comes with the name, right? I don't know if this is conducive to that business plan.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, dude, when you think about like when the cicadas were here and that little shitty tone they'd make, it's just like, try sleeping at that place. Damn.
Yeah, right. So another story, and this is where it gets pretty weird. Another story tells of a young man that was hiking in the mountains on a gloomy day, and he actually got caught in a thunderstorm. And when this thunderstorm happened, he began hearing these unearthly howls and moans in the air. And the sound just continued on as he started searching for shelter from the storm. And finally, he found a cave, but after he entered, he claimed that the air was filled with visions of tortured bodies swirling around him. He claims he doesn't know if he lost consciousness during this time, but what he saw he described as a choir of ghosts, ghouls, and demons floating in the air and singing to him.
Metal.
The screams of torment were all he could hear, and the hiker was convinced that he had taken a look through the doors of hell, which, basically kind of sounds like a portal from that description to me.
Yeah.
That checks out with the description of what you would expect a portal to be, at least.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know of a lot of people that have ingested psilocybin and seen. Most of the time, I feel like the experiences on psilocybin are positive, but I'm sure somebody's seen some freaking demons and shit like that.
Yeah, right. But yeah, this is an interesting experience, and I think it goes back to he doesn't know if he lost consciousness there. He might have blacked out and imagined all this, but still, like a pretty spooky experience to be out on your own in a thunderstorm, and you just hear these howling sounds coming, and you're just trying to find shelter. So I imagine he was in a pretty freaked out mindset to begin with by the time he did reach that cave.
Yeah, I would be too. I mean, dude, you're just in a freaking cave.
Understandable. Yeah, right. So when we get into more of these scientific theories or explanations on it, there was a scientist named Henry E. Cotton, and he came to stay at the hotel from Knoxville, Tennessee, and he basically came just in an attempt to investigate all the mysterious sounds himself, because he was convinced there was a mundane explanation for it. So he claimed that he tried to account for it being, bees or flies or some natural insect in the area that was just creating this buzzing sound. But all the locals reported that the sound really started to take off really after the bees and flies and everything had gone away from the winter, or right before they emerged again, basically saying that during the cold months is when this sound was really prominent. Again, he noted it was frequently reported following thunderstorms, so he started to draw that parallel there. And in a quote, he said, "I used every argument I could to persuade myself that it was simply the result of a common cause and to shake the faith of the country people in this mysterious origin. But unfortunately, I could only convince myself." So he's basically saying that he tried to come up with a scientific theory explanation and share it with everyone else. And they're just like, "No, dude, it's a ghost choir. It's not what you're trying to say." And his conclusion was, he concluded that the sound of the choir was the result from two currents of air meeting each other in the area between two mountain peaks, where there was no obstruction of trees on this peak of Roan Mountain. And he said that one of the currents would have to be carrying a greater amount of electricity than the other to interact and cause a sound in that way. Of the two, or another theory that he kind of tied in, where the two currents were coming together in this open plateau and this high elevation by some sort of friction and being different temperatures that somehow generated electricity, which caused some sort of audible sound. But, as I mentioned, despite these theories, everyone just wanted to believe that it was a choir of supernatural origin.
I mean, it's the more fun thing for sure.
It's the more fun thing for sure. And, keep in mind, this is, probably late 1800s, early 1900s. I don't know what our scientific understanding was on a lot of this stuff, but, it's still interesting that he was coming up with plausible theories on what could be causing this to happen.
For that time, they're really pretty decent.
Yeah. So I did think, you got to give him credit for at least trying to explore the mundane before you jump to the supernatural. But no one wanted to buy that. They thought the ghost choir was the real deal.
Don't you know the devil when you hear him?
So interestingly enough, I found that visitors of Roan Mountain today can still locate what is just a few row of stones that was once the foundation of the Cloudland Hotel. So there's still remnants of where the hotel stood to this day. But the account that I found this in, it was a book, and it said, it is advised that neither children nor adults attempt to find a small cave on an outcropping of the rock at the edge of the bald. There are worse fates than being caught in the rain on an afternoon.
I mean, I get that, dude.
Yeah.
One day when you and I, eventually, we're going to go to Table Rock, and I'm going to take you to a cave over there, and it is freaking terrifying because if you got up in the middle of the night and you just didn't know where you were, your ass could literally fall right off the side of that mountain.
This isn't the Hellier Cave, is it?
I don't think so.
Okay. I know that one was near Table Rock, too.
I don't think I've ever been to the Hellier Cave. You're talking about the one that Micah took the Newkirks to?
Yep. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been to that one.
Okay.
Because I think Micah found it after he and I were going up there a lot.
Gotcha.
But I know of one.
Yeah. So, going back to the whole Roan Mountain and the legend of the ghostly choir and the origin to that, it's kind of up to interpretation with what you want to believe the origins of that. Like I said, I'm not sure if a more recent scientific study has been done on this, but it seems like we should probably, re-examine these conclusions through the lens of modern science. If not, because if that's a phenomenon that's still going on to this day that has a scientific explanation or conclusion that was done 100 plus years ago, I feel like, revisiting some old cases comes in handy sometimes.
Well, nonetheless, it's just an interesting, more than likely geological phenomenon.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, I mean, that's weird as shit.
Exactly.
Just in the idea of it being what I would consider a rare earth noise, that's wild as hell. I just wonder how rough that terrain is to get up there.
Yeah, I believe the AT goes through part of Roan Mountain from what I understand.
Okay.
So, it's hikeable, but, I'm not certain how easy that is, especially from where we'd have to, park access points and all that to get through.
Yeah, and if you're from out west and you've never heard of it, it's the Appalachian Trail.
Sorry.
That's the AT.
Yeah,
No, you're fine.
Too local.
Yeah. Dude, you can never be too local.
You don't know what the AT is, bro?
You don't make your own hummus?
Yeah, so anyways, Ghost Choir is an interesting tale, and it's definitely a piece of, pretty important folklore. I think John Paris is really, a cool guy. He worked for I believe it was the Asheville Times. Maybe it was the Citizen back then. One of those original OG Asheville papers. And he would write a lot of these little kind of folklore quips, and he ended up incorporating them into at least 3 different books. So this one's more interesting than the Boojum one to me. I think the Boojum thing is it's a fun story that has, some interesting origins. But this one really is describing something that sounds like it could be pretty strange occurrence that legit happens.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love the Boojum.
Yeah. Trying to politely be nice to the Boojum here.
Don't you be mean to the Boojum, bro. What has the Boojum ever done to you personally, Austin?
Nothing at all, actually.
He's only brought you joy and mild distaste for white people.
Well, we met the Boojum outside of Marcia's at the Tire Squatch.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. A beautiful,
majestic.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe him.
Marcia, if you're listening, howdy. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, we'll get on that subject very soon.
Oh, nice.
But even apart from these stories of the Ghost Choir, the more I dug into Roan Mountain, I quickly realized that this place was just a pretty big hotspot for high strangeness in general. Everything from strange lights, UFO reports, cryptid sightings, and just your other traditional ghost stories. This place has it all. Kind of want to run through just all the weird high strangeness stuff that's been reported in this area, starting off with one that even John Paris was describing in his original account, and that is the circular rainbow, which is kind of a massive halo of color that's commonly reported in the sky near Roan Mountain. And it apparently only appears after rain in rare conditions, so it's certain atmospheric conditions that need to be present for this to form in this specific area. But John Paris described it as God's halo because it does resemble the halos that are seen behind like the heads of saints in these religious paintings.
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about?
Whoa. Double rainbow. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I haven't seen a completed circular rainbow, but I've seen one that was damn near there.
Really?
I couldn't see the bottom of it, but I mean, dude, it was basically completely formed.
Interesting. Yeah. So these circular rainbows, as you just described, they're an actual occurrence that's been witnessed by a lot of people in the area. And, it is seen as rare because it needs not only certain location geographic conditions, it has to be certain atmospheric conditions mixed with these locations for something like this to happen. But yeah, the halo description is kind of spot on because it kind of does resemble this kind of multicolored glowing orb from the pictures that I saw of them.
But it makes sense that they would be a circle when they're allowed to do that.
At their certain, elevation, maybe that's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did you see it? Just
up on the parkway.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense then. Higher elevation.
Yeah. It had a shit ton of space. It was just a very small section of the bottom that I couldn't see, but it was cool as hell.
That is cool. Yeah. I started looking into pictures of them after finding that, and pretty interesting natural atmospheric phenomenon. But that wasn't the only strange lights or form of strange light that was reported around Roan Mountain. I found another source that describes the Roan Mountain Ghost Lights, which kind of sounds basically similar, if not exactly the same, as the Brown Mountain Lights or the Thomas Defied Lights. And this was the description of it. I only found these described on one source, so I'm not sure if this was, maybe an interpretation of that halo rainbow, the circular rainbow thing being interpreted as a orb ghost light thing, or if it's, its own unique phenomenon. But the way it's described is the Roan Mountain ghost lights have been reported for over a century, with sightings occurring mainly at night, often described as glowing orbs. Local residents have proposed various theories about the lights, including explanations related to car headlights, bioluminescent fungi, and even ghostly apparitions. Scientific investigations have largely failed to provide definite explanations for the lights, leaving room for speculation and continued interest in the phenomenon. The mystery of the Roan Mountain ghost lights has contributed to the area's allure for tourists and paranormal enthusiasts, making it a popular destination for those intrigued by local legends. The ghost lights are often connected to other regional folklore, reflecting the cultural significance of storytelling and shared beliefs in the Appalachian community. Kind of vague, doesn't really give too much description on that, and kind of, seems copy-pasted from Brown Mountain. Like, you could just input Brown Mountain over Roan Mountain on this, and I think you'd pretty much get the same description.
Yeah, probably so. But to me, it kind of raises a little bit of a larger question. I mean, obviously, you have this range of mountains that are all connected, but you have this phenomena that is continually reported in different areas. With, like you said, you got the Roan Mountain lights, you got the Thomas Divide lights, and the Brown Mountain thing. If this is a scientific phenomena, obviously the older Appalachian mountains seem to be conducive to that. Now, if that is because of and I don't know shit about shit when it comes to geology, but it's like, if that's because of compaction of the minerals or the rocks or whatever,
Quartz,
that just below the mountains, that the older the mountain gets, the more prone to being able to produce this phenomenon it is. I mean, that's one way to think about it, but that's the bigger question in my mind with it all.
Yeah, what you just mentioned kind of sent me down my own rabbit hole of what Warren was talking about when we spoke with him about drawing the line between these paranormal places and seeing what connection. It'd almost be interesting to see where these all kind of map out to when you start putting some of these ghost light, locations onto a physical map.
Well, maybe we can theorize a little bit about that on the Midnight Broadcast.
I am down for that. I like that name too.
Oh yeah,
it's got a better ring than the Nugget.
I don't know. We can still do the Nugget. And hey, if you don't know, real quick, we have started an after show after every single episode where we kind of go into some of the more in-depth theories of what we think is going on, and it's called the Midnight Broadcast, and it is for yours to have if you're one of our Patreon subscribers. So please go check that out. We want to make sure everybody,
y'all.
we want everybody that is a subscriber to know that that's a thing.
Yeah.
So that's all yours, and if you want to get access to that, just become a Patreon subscriber, and it's all yours.
Yeah, all yours.
Yeah. Anyway, so go on.
Yeah, with that being said, Roan Mountain also has a handful of UFO sightings reported in the area, which kind of go along with some of the mysterious lights. I think ghost light UFO sightings can kind of be tied into one and the same in some instances.
Very much so.
So there's not a ton, but still interesting enough to note. There was one in 2008, one in 2010, two in 2013, and one in 2021. So, just a good little handful there. But
yeah, but all recent.
Yeah, all fairly recent. I mean, this is coming from MUFON and sources like that. So it's they weren't necessarily, I guess some of them were collecting data from stuff back in the day, but it is interesting that it is, all fairly recent. The one from 2010 caught my eye in particular because it was described as a pillar of light, which kind of sounds like something similar that Adriana and I saw when we were in Crestone last summer. So that one kind of was interesting to me just because you don't typically hear of, pillars of light being a common UFO thing. I think they're kind of associated with maybe a beam of light, picking up a cow and some of the comical memes of interpretations of it. But that was actually reported as a UFO sighting on MUFON. Definitely caught my attention. And the witness described it. He said, the thing looked as if someone had an airport spotlight shining straight up, but it ended abruptly, about 75 to 100 yards up. And you could not tell if it was beaming upwards or down, just a standing pillar of light in the middle of nowhere. It didn't look like bear hunters. I can't figure it out. It looked similar to the tail of a comet, but I've never seen a comet that large or bright.
I mean, that's almost exactly what you described seeing.
Yeah, basically. So that one really kind of just like, huh.
Yeah, and you had mentioned, I think it was on our Thomas Divide episode. I had asked you, I was like, did you think that maybe it was a spotlight from a car dealership or something like that?
Yeah.
But you're like, dude, there's nothing out there.
Yeah. Thomas Divide's just nature.
Yeah.
So, and and the Crestone one too, especially, like there's There's no car dealerships in Crestone, Colorado for sure.
Yeah, weird, man.
Yeah. But yeah, that one definitely caught my attention. And I did think, that's interesting that it gets lumped into those UFO sightings that enough to be reported or shared again on MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network for people that go on and kind of report their UFO sightings. And it's kind of a big database you could go through and look through sightings in your area, other areas that you're curious about. So good resource for stuff like that. So Roan Mountain, as that you can kind of expect with this, it has its handful of traditional ghost stories tied to it as well. And one of the most popular ones that I found centers around an area I've seen described as the Dark Hollow Cemetery, because that's the road that it's found on. And according to this story, on the flanks of the mountain where a mysterious road called Dark Hollow Road is located, the legend here revolves around a woman named Delinda. In some sources, she's a prostitute. In other accounts, she's simply a, lover on the side, or sometimes she is suggested to be a witch. But most sources agree that she was indeed carrying relationships with many of the local men in the area, most of whom were married. And in fact, she was even suspected of spreading some form of illness to these men, further angering their already spurned wives. Now, blogger Jason Norris Brown recounts in his now sadly defunct blog, Ghosts and Spirits of Tennessee, that Delinda was in love with one of these men in particular named Jenkins. And when he died, she was suspected of climbing into his casket so that they could spend eternity together.
Eternity with Leroy Jenkins.
Another version of the legend is that the women of the town ended up killing her and hiding her body in Mr. Jenkins' casket. And following the burial, locals began to notice a shadowy figure around the cemetery at the bend of the road. In a darker version of this story, Delinda was murdered by a group of the angry wives when she was invited to a quilting bee, which I think is just kind of a social gathering where they go and make quilts.
Quilt circle.
Yeah. So unsuspectingly, she arrived and they tarred and feathered her before then hanging her in a nearby tree.
God.
Yeah.
Shit sucked back then, dude.
Yeah, no joke. So to this day, there are reports that drivers near the cemetery area have experienced an odd bump to their cars, sometimes feeling like a person has jumped on the bumper, which has been blamed on the spirit of Delinda trying to hitch a ride. One story cited by several local sources describes a group of friends driving past the cemetery at night when the car begins to buck wildly, as if the driver was stepping on the accelerator and the brakes at the same time. Then, more recently, paranormal investigator and researcher Justin H. Guess, he noted in his 2012 book, he wrote, it was basically based on the hauntings of Carter County, Tennessee, which is that local area, that visitors of the cemetery would throw a coin up in the air and have it disappear before it hit the earth. Sounds pretty spooky. But the identity of this exact cemetery has not been reported. But through some digging, it appears that it might be called the Birchfield Cemetery, which is located across the road from another small family cemetery in the area. But please, with me saying this, have respect for the families who own those cemeteries and their loved ones and families that are buried there. If you do make it up the mountain to this.
We don't want a bunch of coin flippers going down there.
Yeah, I'm trying to say, I'm pretty sure these are private cemeteries. So, if you do, try to trace some of this down, maybe stay out of that one.
Dude, you just hear... Got ourselves a couple of coin flippers in the graveyard, man.
So I thought this was interesting that some of those versions described her as a witch, because this isn't the only story of witchcraft being mentioned in the Dark Hollow Road area. Another story tells of a young drifter who made his way to Jonesboro, Tennessee, to the town's early years during a particularly cold November. And he ended up racking up a significant amount of debt to just several parties and was well aware of the harsh punishment at the time, what they would do to bankrupt people who couldn't pay their debt. And he decided that it was time to ditch town and move along. And the drifter, he began to trek through the Roan Highlands, planning to cross over into the North Carolina side of the mountain near something called Sunset Rock. Roan's Bald Mountains were, as you would expect, bitterly cold in December. And he was thinking, basically he was on the borderline or brink of death from some of the cold exposure he was experiencing on this trip. And the drifter found himself at the door of a cabin by sheer luck that was just randomly on this mountain. And 2 old women welcomed him in, feeding him and providing him with a place to sleep. And he was just thinking to himself, like, oh man, this is really lucky that I managed to find this place.
Until they turned him into a gingerbread cookie and bit his head off.
You're not far off.
Oh, nice.
So the drifter awoke to his hosts coating themselves head to toe in lard.
Oh, hell yeah.
And upon chanting a magical spell and flying out through the little cabin's chimney. The drifter decided to follow their example. Up the chimney he went, following the ladies over the bald mountains back into Jonesboro. There he found them shopping. They were filling their sacks to the brim with general store's food and whiskey and just other party supplies. And he had a particular liking for whiskey, especially when it was free. So he awoke sometime later beneath a large barrel of it. And the next morning, as you can imagine, the townsfolk were not happy with his thievery, and the man's punishment was arranged to be carried out quite quickly. As the tale goes, our protagonist was visited later in his jail cell by the greasy witches who struck a bargain in exchange for his freedom. And now on cold winter nights, folks in small Tennessee towns say they occasionally wake up with lighter cupboards and empty bottles of whiskey.
Don't act like you've never been to a lard party.
I love it because it's just implying like they needed the lard to squeeze through the chimney.
Dude, that's so fun.
And I love that he called them the greasy witches.
So many great band names coming out of this story. The Greasy Witches. The other one I liked was Buck Wildly. It's like it's a guy.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great band name.
One. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
I actually have performed as a band called Uncle Buck Wild.
Oh, okay. So you had the origins already planted.
I'm always looking for a good band name.
There you go. There's another story that tells of the spirit of a ghost bull as kind of another explanation for the sounds of the ghost choir, but honestly, it's not that interesting or exciting. So you get the point. There's a ghost bull, and apparently he's the one howling.
Look, we did Ghost Goblin recently. Ghost Bull's not going to top it. We're not even going to try to touch it.
But even paranormal fiction author S.A. Jacobs, he took inspiration from all these strange accounts in his book that was aptly titled The Haunting of Roan Mountain. Now, keep in mind, this is fictional, but the description says, for paranormal investigator David Spur, nothing is as dangerous as home. A lot has changed for David since the events of the Demon of Mansfield Manor. He now spends his time traveling the nation's most notorious haunted sites for his popular television show. But when he returns to Tennessee for a much-needed break, he quickly realizes vacation is not going to be relaxing.
Oh, dear.
No.
Is S.A. Jacobs still alive?
I have no idea. It looks like this is a fairly recent book.
Yeah. That name sounds so familiar to me for some reason.
Yeah, I didn't really recognize any of his other work, but I assume The Demon of Mansfield Manor is probably one of them.
But that's fiction too?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this guy just writes like paranormal-based fiction, which is cool.
Hell yeah, dude.
Nothing against that. It's just it's cool that you don't often see that kind of bleed into, some of these subjects, especially around here that we talk about, finding their way into paranormal fiction genre.
I don't know. People get their ideas from all over the place, but I had never heard about any bit of this. And it's super interesting that there's all this shit, witches and all this crazy lore around here. Its own version of the Brown Mountain Lights. Killer,
exactly. Dude. But, I promised you some cryptid encounters.
You did. And I was like, did he just breeze over it and I didn't hear it?
No. There's some wild ones.
Oh,
so
thank God.
Let's start off with this one. It goes, and these are like first-person accounts. So actually, no, not all these are first-person accounts. Some of these are paraphrased. So this says, one evening in 2010 near Roan Mountain, Tennessee, a woman was driving her ex and his son back home from a birthday party at a favorite restaurant and was coming along the 2-lane stretch of road when they saw what appeared to be a large white ball that had moved out into the highway directly from the cemetery above. She said it began coming towards them as if it was going to collide with the vehicle, and the closer they got to this thing, the better look they had at it. She described it as being half animal, reptile, half human with human limbs. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, and was crawling on its belly. She hoped that the creature would exit the highway and into the woods to prevent getting hit, but it continued moving directly at them in the vehicle. She slammed on her brakes to avoid hitting it, and at that point, the creature went from spinning like a tornado right before it made contact with the front of the vehicle. She then said it went beneath the radiator and vanished. She, her ex, and her son were all quite shaken and terrified, and said whatever the creature wasn't anything from this world. She continued describing it as having 2 human arms and legs, mid-body of an alligator or reptile, and its coloring was as white as snow. It crawled on its stomach like a reptile. Her ex stated that during the encounter, it felt like time had stood still. Everything just slowed down. All 3 of them agreed it had a very eerie feeling of something very evil present before they encountered this thing.
Okay, so by all accounts, minus the fact that it is seemingly albino,
Yeah.
this is as close as I could tell to the Chior Swamp, South Carolina lizard man.
It sounds pretty close. I think what kind of caught my eye is like it was described as like this ball of light when it first appeared, which is kind of interesting because it goes back to that kind of topic of ghost lights or orbs, if you want to call it.
And also the spinning thing.
The spinning thing. And then the other thing about it coming from the cemetery up the road, it's like, is that the same cemetery that was alluded to, the Dark Hollow Cemetery and some of those other accounts? I don't know. It's interesting that some of those elements come up again in this one.
Yeah, but I'm also seeing this parallel that we found on the episode that we did about the rake in Curry, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
This borderline, well, this cryptid essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
Is essentially like spawning out of this frickin' cemetery or, close enough to that.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's one thing to give a description of what you've seen. Is it a Bigfoot? Is it a Sasquatch? Stuff like that.
No, it was your typical albino tornado lizard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the name of that cryptid.
That old trope. The spinning albino tornado lizard. Shit, we see him every Thursday.
So, speaking of, we do have some Bigfoot encounters, though.
Let's go.
In this account, an Alabama man is visiting his sister in Roan Mountain, Tennessee. So, while out at night exploring, he had a dramatic close encounter with what he described as a huge Sasquatch. The creature then disappeared into what he described as a portal. And in his quotes about this, he said, "The only person I've ever told is my wife at the time, now my ex. She laughed and accused me of making it all up. Before I get to my encounter, I'll give you a little backstory. I was born in Mobile, Alabama in 1964. Up until the mid-20s, I think he meant his mid-20s.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyways, up until the mid-20s, I'd never been on any higher ground than a couple feet above sea level. In the mid-80s and early 90s, my sister had gotten married and moved to Roan Mountain in eastern Tennessee. My wife and I took a trip up there to visit her for a week. After the first few days of running around and seeing the sights, we spent the day just hanging at the house. This led to a few cold beverages being consumed and the grill getting fired up that evening. Later that night, around 9 p.m., I went out to the back porch to get another beer. That's when I noticed about half a dozen deer about 100 yards out in the field behind the house. One had a nice rack, and I couldn't quite make out the number of points, so I slipped off the porch and eased over the corner of the fence, which put me about 60 to 70 yards away from them. As I'm standing there against the fence, watching the deer, this big one, the nice 10-point minimum 200 class. I have no idea what any of this means. Anyways, that's when I noticed the moon. When I say I noticed, I mean noticed. It was huge. It seemed so much closer than I'd ever seen it before. Now I've been out in the Gulf of Mexico at night, and I've been able to witness the moon well away from any city lights. And you could see all kinds of detail on the surface of the moon with the naked eye. But that night, I finally understood what the word awesome means or what awestruck meant. So I'm standing at the fence watching the deer, or was supposed to be, but I can't take my eyes off this big glowing yellow orangish ball that seemed to be just out of reach. So after what I thought was around 20 minutes later, I found out it was more like an hour. I started noticing a tickling sensation on the back of my neck. I shrugged my shoulders and turned my neck a couple times, trying to shake loose whatever was tickling me. And just then, the deer got spooked and bounced away. The noise finally forced me to break my gaze from the moon. That's when I realized I'd probably been out there for long enough. I decided to go back inside. I took one last look and mumbled, "Wow," at the beauty of this little sun-reflecting satellite that orbits the world, and that's when it hit me. I felt the hot breath of this huge creature hit the back of my neck, and at the same time hearing or feeling the deepest chest rumbling, I'd ever heard. I spied into my right, looking over my shoulder. All I could see was black as far as my peripheral vision would allow. It was all Bigfoot. This all happened for a split second. When I got my head around far enough, I realized that my face was maybe 8 to 10 inches away from this thing's upper abdomen. Looking up, I saw the beast's pectoral muscles stuck off his chest about 6 inches and were huge. His chest was every bit 4.5 feet wide, and his shoulders were as big as basketballs. and they added another foot or so on each side of his shoulder-to-shoulder arm spread. This thing was at least 6 feet wide. I've not got a good look of his hands or its face, or its arms, but they were probably more impressive than his chest and his shoulders. If Hulk Hogan had 22-inch pipe bones, this bipedal beast was sporting 28 to 30-inch guns. His forearms would make Popeye jealous. His arms were covered in long hair, maybe 4 or 6 inches in length. If I had to guess, this behemoth must have been around 10 feet tall and 700 to 800 pounds. As far as his face goes, from the angle, all I got was he had some sort of squared off bearded chin. I cannot see a nose, eyes, ears, raised eyebrows, conical head, nothing like that. So I can't say whether it looked more like a man or an ape. His arms were more like an ape, but his chest was more human-like, just a bit more hairy than most. Now, this is where the story starts getting weird. As I mentioned, it happened all in a split second. As I spun around and was in the process of looking up at this thing was going from a bent-over position to standing straight up, taking a step back to his right.
I'm sorry, this is where it starts getting weird?
That's how he describes it. Not my words here. As he pulled his left leg over his right, it was like he was slipping through a slit in a green screen. I'm not sure if it was a portal or some sort of interdimensional doorway or what. All I know was this thing vanished within a split second. By the way, there was no foul smell associated with this creature. There was a slight musty smell, but it reminded me of the same smell a horse gives off. I mean, you could smell it, but I'm not going to say it was a stench. I will say this. I hear a lot of people saying these things are evil or demons, and they may be. All I know is I got the impression that this beast was intelligent and appreciated my interest in the moon. The that he gave out made me feel the same way I would feel when I do something good or that would make my grandfather proud, and he would give me the same approving that this Bigfoot did. You just never know the same volume or power that this thing did.
Okay, so right off the bat, I actually think that the visual that is painted in this story is very beautiful.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go off and write my own fan fiction real quick. So here's where it goes in my mind. All right. Now, I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity when the Bigfoot just goes off into his own pocket dimension. That's fine. He can do what he wants. But this is where it went in my mind. He's staring at this beautiful moon. And then behind him, he hears the big, And then as careless whisper, the saxophone just rises out of the ethers of the evening. Bigfoot takes him ever so sweetly by the neck and just says, "Kiss me, you fool."
It was setting up for that. It felt like it was setting up for that for a while.
Because it was a really romantic scene.
Yeah.
And
Maybe he didn't want to include that part when he told it to his wife.
Probably so.
Yeah.
But let's just put it out there. Number one, it's not every day you see a Bigfoot. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Then Bigfoot wants to make you his special friend that night. Who are we to say no?
Yeah. I mean, why not? That I will say, this brings me back to some kind of these Boojum qualities, maybe a little bit on the creepy side, spying on some people.
You can't tell me Boojum wasn't doing some smooching.
Right?
Under the moonlight.
Maybe the, was just the Roan Mountain version of the lip smacking, Yeah.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Yoda's.
Oh, that too. Yoda foot.
Well, look. Oh, wow. That's a cute thing. If this did happen to somebody, that is one of the most magical freaking Bigfoot encounters I've ever heard of. I like my version a little better, but you do you.
Yeah, that one's pretty out there, but you could find it online. So this guy felt like sharing it and putting it out there to the public. Who am I to deny him his story on our episode about Roan Mountain?
Yeah, who are we to deny somebody their Bigfoot is my grandpa fanfic?
The spirit of my grandpa is what I think he alludes to. But
I love that though, dude.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it has a beautiful little message in the if you read between the lines there.
And friend, if you're listening and you wrote this, we're just having fun. We think your story is actually really wonderful.
Yeah, but this next one is even weirder because it does come with a photograph, and I will drop that into the Patreon Dropbox here, and I'll let you see this right after I run through this because it's pretty weird. But this one is a woman who lives in Roan Mountain, I guess on the North Carolina side. She was taking photographs of her dog when she was later going back through these photos, and keep in mind, this is like middle of winter, there's snow everywhere. It is white out. You could see all kinds of tracks. Not all kinds of tracks, but you could see the dog tracks. You could see her footprints. Like, it's very easy to see where people have been through there. So when she's going back through this photo session she did with her dog, she discovered the image of what she attributes to a possible Bigfoot. And like I said, the photograph was taken on Roan Mountain in February of 2015. And the submitter of the photograph to this website states that his friend took the photograph, and that in her version of it, she said that it dropped down behind where the white snowy ground creates this line in the background. And then it came back up to where you can see the ground over where this dark thing is. So it's kind of like this little overcropping. You could see above the line of the snow, and then you could see just what is this dark, big, huge, shadowy figure. And he goes on to say that my friend's a very believable person. She would never make anything like this up. He's a frequent hiker, and she's been doing this for many years. So it's not like she's ever made up this encounter before, and she's very used and very, acquainted with what her surroundings are in this nature environment of Roan Mountain. And she describes basically what she believes to be a Bigfoot, but she's always been open-minded about the idea of the paranormal. She's never really said that she's had an encounter up until this one point. But since this image, she's been subscribing to all kinds of Bigfoot podcasts and learning as much as she can about the creature, because this kind of just sparked her interest with her finding what is a pretty weird, shadowy, big figure in the back of this photo. Apparently, she has more photos from up there. She took a few selfies and a few pictures of her dog. And then when she reached the summit, but this is apparently the only one that they took from that angle. So it's the only one that captured this kind of figure in there. And looking at this photo, if it isn't photoshopped, it is really compelling. If not a Bigfoot, some sort of shadowy creature. So again, I'll drop this in the Patreon Dropbox there, so you could kind of take your own gander at it. And quite honestly, you could probably do some Google searching and find this thing if you really wanted to. But it's a pretty weird one.
I'm excited to see that. It very much reminds me of the story that was told by that woman that took that picture in Yellowstone Park when we talked about the existence of Sasquatch on that episode with Micah. I can't remember what number that one was, but she was just taking pictures of the park.
Yeah.
And this thing ends up, and the park rangers all looked at that shit, and some of them kind of seemed like they knew what it was.
Yeah, like they're like, oh, you're not the first. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because she states that she was 100% sure she was the only one up there at the time, because, like I said, you could see all the tracks. There was no one else around. You'd be able to see other footprints if there was another, person or couple hiking through this area.
That's the thing right there. When you borderline know that there's nobody else up there. I was talking to Cliff Barrickman up at CryptidCon in Kentucky just a couple of months ago, and that was what he was talking to me about, was this property up there in Washington. And he was like, dude, I know there aren't people up here.
Yeah.
And we keep finding these footprints.
That's pretty wild.
It was insane.
Yeah.
I'm not saying his perspective. I think, he's the one out there doing the damn work, but it's just crazy. That's what he was saying to me. So that's all I'm going to say.
Interesting note to kind of go along with that one. So yeah, looking at the picture, it's pretty weird, if nothing else. And I'll let people draw their own conclusions with that. But I did want to close with one more, sort of cryptid, I guess. It goes into the realm of the Fae. So I don't know how you want to classify that. But
awesome.
Yeah. According to this one, the account says, my aunt's ashes were spread along the trail next to the river in Roan Mountain State Park in Tennessee. I have pictures of odd energy and spirals from the day my family spread the ashes. The photos are of my cousin's young children. That was about 6 years ago, around 2013. And I visit the spot every summer because I live about 2 hours away now. I have seen strange things. These are things I do not even believe in. Walking along the spot one year with my other aunt, who was the sister of the one who had passed, we were attacked by a tiny white fairy-type creature. Now, I don't believe in fairies. I don't know what this thing was. It was a tiny white body with wings, all white and smaller than the size of a dime. We both held it and tried to take pictures of it with our phone. Both our phones just show our bare hands in the picture. I have also seen shadows in the water of humans and heard whistling and laughing that had no source while up on the mountain. I tell people this and they think I'm crazy, but it's all true. My aunt was a tortured soul, and I hope it's not her energy. Maybe it was there before all this.
Can I tell you something weird?
Yeah.
Like 3 weeks ago, I had a dream that my wife Charlotte, myself, and you and your wife Adriana were in this beautiful green grotto in these weird little cabins, and there were little white fairies flying around.
Huh. If that's not a synchronicity, maybe we got to go to Roan Mountain. Maybe we got to make the 6,000 some foot trek up the mountain and do some investigating.
Dude, to be perfectly honest with you, after this shit,
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking we might ought to go.
You know, it's going to be a hike, but, you know, it can't be that bad. There's got to be an access point we could drive to and get up to the mountaintop in a reasonable amount of time.
I highly doubt it's worse than things we've hiked before.
Yeah, fair enough. And, you know, if nothing else, a few-hour hike in the summer. I don't know if I'm going to try to do that in the winter.
Oh, hell no. I was going to say, yeah, we're going to plot this out later on the midnight broadcast. But, dude, yeah, I'm not even touching late spring.
Yeah, there you go.
It's got to be early summer.
For sure.
No
for
way
sure.
in hell. All right, dude. Well, when you told me at the beginning of the podcast that this thing was, and I'm saying this, you didn't say this, the 7-layer burrito of paranormal experiences, man, you were not kidding. That's insane. Dude, again, we've had episodes like this before. I think the Andrews Geyser episode was like this, where it's just like this, you know, I knew of Andrews Geyser, but that was one of the things where it was like, God, all this shit is connected to this place. This one I hadn't heard of, but it's a friggin' paranormal buffet.
Yeah.
It's got everything you want. Honestly, man, it's treacherous up there. It's a little tough to get to, but to say that my interest in going up there is piqued is to say it very lightly. And I don't even love getting out there and busting ass and getting in the field, but I think the thing that probably intrigues me the most about it is the rare earth noise thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole big main topic of this to begin with. I think that's the thing that's kind of the headline that draws people in. But once you start digging, there's even more weird shit than the ghostly choir earth noise, if you want to call it that.
Whatever that is, I want to hear it.
Yeah.
I want to see what that's like.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of going back to the whole thing, like, has there been a modern scientific investigation of this area since whatever that was, 1910 or prior to that?
Seemingly not, because I kind of feel like you would have found it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and not that we're like really scientists, but at least go up there and take some data that we could get to some people.
Else. Yeah, exactly.
I could ship that down to Darby Orcutt down there in Greensboro and have him take a look at it.
Yeah, true.
Even though he's busy deciphering, well, some of the stuff that Cliff is talking about, you know. But man, thank you so much for bringing this to the table.
Got to thank your dad. Thank the pops for that one. That was completely bookmarked on his end. So he had the whole John Paris collection, and this one was dog-eared for me. So this was definitely one he wanted us to do.
Pops, I love you, and thanks for sending along this stuff. You know, when we first started this podcast, the dad was just like, you know,
pulling out all the books.
Exactly. Yeah. He was just like, oh, yeah, I'll find some shit for you. Because the dude could basically just take a book and shove it into his forehead, and he just has the knowledge. You know, like he can get through a book that quick. That
is cool. And one really cool thing I'll even mention on this is he had a signed copy of that John Paris book, like autograph and everything firsthand. So
there you go.
I don't know if he obtained that firsthand or if that was passed down through a collection. Either way, that is definitely a collector's piece there and a piece of history.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That makes me think we ought to have the dad in studio.
Yeah.
On an episode.
I've thought about that.
I actually know a really fun topic we could talk about with him.
Okay. I thought of another one you'd mentioned to me too. We'll have to brainstorm on these.
There's a bunch. I will tease it. The Illuminati.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, I like that one. That's a pretty good overarching one there.
Because not a lot of people know the term, but they don't really know where it comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Pops knows all about it. It'd be an interesting one. All right, everybody. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed our episode about the Roan Mountain Ghost Choir and the millions other things that come along with it, as much as we have enjoyed talking about this. Man, as I always say, incredible work. You always do incredible work. And I have had so much fun. I feel like I got to taste a piece of food that had every flavor I've ever wanted.
Right.
It
was a little bit of everything.
It was so great. We are going to sign off from our flagship show, Ghost in the Mountains. But for our Patreon subscriber,
for my mom,
for Austin's mom, our Patreon subscriber, for our Patreon subscribers, the party doesn't have to stop there, because we are going to do the midnight broadcast at 9:30 at night. That's usually how it goes down. But again, if you want to hear our after show where we I think tonight we're going to do something fun. We're going to do a little D&D style planning of how we would do a paranormal investigation of this area, because there's a lot of shit to cover. We're going to kind of go into what we would do to plan this out, and we're going to kind of go over some different theories about some of the topics that came up in this particular episode. So if you want to hear more of that, please subscribe to us on Patreon. You will have access to the midnight broadcast, our after show, and then you will also have access to an ad-free RSS feed of our show. And we're putting together a couple of other goodies. As we mentioned before, you will have access to some behind the scenes images, pictures, supplemental information that Austin has found doing research of all of our shows since day one.
Once I get that updated.
Yeah, once he gets it updated. He's a little backlogged at times because, we both are working, multiple jobs and doing the podcast as well. So thank you very much for your patience with that stuff. But we are also, much like we did this past Halloween, we did a cover of one of our favorite punk rock songs, and, I am always working on music and things like that, and I am working very diligently to bring more of that sort of stuff to you guys, and I'm going to expand a little bit upon that later on in the future, but we've got some things in the works, and we really, really, really want to enrich your experience of our podcast, as much as we possibly can, so we cannot thank you all enough for your continued support. Thank you all for listening, and especially our Patreon supporters. It means so much that you guys like what we do enough to contribute financially. That's amazing.
For sure. And if you like what we do but can't contribute financially, if you just want to leave us a review or some stars on whatever platform you listen on, that really helps a lot too.
Absolutely. Even shitty reviews help the algorithm. On YouTube, not on Spotify. Leave us good ones. And Apple Podcasts. But that said, this has been such a fun show. This show right here, this is what it's all about for me. Like getting to find something that is so close to home and all of this really interesting, fun lore that just runs the whole gamut of every single thing that you could want in paranormal shit. And dude, this just goes to show there are ghosts in the mountains.
Oh, the well is deep.
The well is deep. But thanks so much for listening. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Ghosts in the Mountains. Stay spooky, everybody. You said that there was a woman on this episode tonight, and she was a frequent hiker or something.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, she was a real freak! Went hiker. That was all that was going through my mind. All right, there's your Keith Drag. It's a short one, but we love you. Good night. We'll see you on the midnight broadcast.